At my son Nathan's glittering Napa Valley wedding, under the glow of 1,000 candles, my daughter-in-law Claire sneered to the waiter, her voice slicing through the crowd. "The help eats in the kitchen." My heart shattered, the pain so raw it burned my soul to ash. My own flesh and blood stood there laughing while I drowned in betrayal. So I gripped my phone, my rage a wildfire, and made a call that would turn their world to dust. You'll never guess what I unleashed. The Napa Valley sun dipped low, casting golden shadows over rows of grapevines, but the warmth couldn't touch the chill in my bones. I'd built Harper Estates from nothing, a $5,000 loan, a beat-up typewriter, and a dream scratched out on napkins while Nathan slept in his crib. 40 years of grit turned a tiny real estate office into a wine and property empire, with vineyards stretching across 200 acres and a name that opened doors from San Francisco to New York. I poured my soul into it, raising Nathan through late nights and lost deals, his tiny hands clutching my sketches as I pitched to skeptical investors. That was my legacy, my blood in the soil. But now, standing in this wedding's glow, I was just Eleanor Harper, not mom, not even founder. It started small, the slights. The invitation arrived late, addressed to Eleanor Harper, no mention of mother of the groom. At the rehearsal dinner, they seated me 3 tables back, behind Claire's yoga coach and some influencer with 1 million followers. My signature Cabernet, the one I'd crafted to honor my late father, was swapped for Claire's organic rosé, her label plastered everywhere like a cheap billboard. "It's more on brand," Claire had said, her smile sharp as a paper cut. Nathan just nodded, his eyes on his phone. Dorothy, my assistant of 25 years, caught my gaze that night. "They're rewriting you," she whispered. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was in the details, the ones I'd taught Nathan to notice. At a board meeting last month, he'd introduced me as Eleanor, our founder, his voice clipped, like I was a line item. Claire had smirked, adding, "We're modernizing her vision." Modernizing, as if my life's work was a dusty heirloom they could polish and claim. The betrayal wasn't just in their words, it was in Nathan's silence, the boy I'd carried through heartbreak now letting his wife erase me. The Napa Valley night pressed against me, heavy with the scent of crushed grapes and betrayal. Claire's words, "The help eats in the kitchen," still burned. A blade lodged in my chest, twisting with every smug glance from her and every indifferent chuckle from Nathan. My son, the boy I'd raised through sleepless nights and scraped knees, stood there, his Merlot glass glinting under the chandeliers, as if my humiliation was just another toast to his perfect day. The crowd's murmurs faded into a dull roar, their pitying looks like salt in the wound. I was Eleanor Harper, the woman who'd turned a $5,000 loan into a 200-acre empire of vineyards and real estate, yet here I was, reduced to a shadow in my own son's story. My heart screamed, a raw, jagged thing, but my face stayed stone. I wouldn't give Claire the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not here. Not now. I slipped away from the reception, my heels sinking into the soft earth of the vineyard's edge. The string quartet's notes drifted, a mockery of joy, as I found solace among the vines. Their leaves curled in the moonlight, whispering secrets I'd buried too long. My hands trembled, not with weakness but with a fury that could torch this whole valley. I pulled my phone from my clutch, the cold metal grounding me. Arthur Bennett, my lawyer of 30 years, answered on the first ring. "Eleanor, everything okay?" His voice was steady, a lighthouse in my storm. "No," I said, my tone sharp as a guillotine. "Freeze the $25 million vineyard expansion Nathan was set to announce tonight. It's my money, my call." Silence hung for a moment, thick as fog. "You're sure?" he asked, not questioning my sanity but my resolve. "I've never been surer," I replied. "And Arthur?" "Transfer the oversight of the Harper Trust to Dorothy Miller. Effective immediately." He didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. I'll notify the board before midnight." I hung up, my breath catching as the weight of my decision settled. This wasn't just a contract. It was the future Nathan thought he'd inherit, the one he'd paraded as his own. Now, it was ash. I stood there, the breeze tugging at my dress, the vines swaying like witnesses to my reckoning. I'd built Harper Estates with my own hands, my own sweat, my own sleepless nights while Nathan slept soundly in the next room. Every deal I'd closed, every acre I'd claimed, was for him, for us. But he'd let Claire rewrite me, let her turn my legacy into a prop for her Instagram aesthetic. The pain was a living thing, clawing at my chest, but it fueled me. I wasn't just taking back money. I was taking back my name. Dorothy, my assistant, my confidant, deserved that trust more than Nathan ever would. She'd been there through every crisis, her loyalty as unyielding as the oak barrels in our cellars. "You're playing with fire, Eleanor," she'd warned me once, when I let Nathan take the reins of the company. She was right. And now, I was the flame. I turned back toward the reception, the glow of the tent spilling onto the grass. Claire's laughter rang out, sharp and performative, as she posed for photos with Nathan. He adjusted his tie, oblivious to the seismic shift I'd just unleashed. The guests sipped their rosé, Claire's rosé, not mine, unaware that the empire they toasted was no longer Nathan's to claim. I caught Dorothy's eye across the crowd. Her nod was subtle, but it said everything. She knew. She'd seen the slights, the erased invitations, the rebranded wine. She'd warned me about Claire's ambition, about Nathan's silence. "They think you're a relic," she'd said last week, her voice low over coffee. "They're wrong." I'd replied then, and now I was proving it. I slipped my phone back into my clutch, the weight of it like a loaded gun. The quartet shifted to a slow waltz, and I straightened my spine. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of their unraveling. I took a step back toward the tent, but my mind was already racing ahead. The pain of Nathan's betrayal, the sting of Claire's mockery, it was all too raw, too deep. I thought of the nights I'd spent teaching him to dream big, the mornings I'd braided his shoelaces before school, the years I'd poured into building a legacy for him. And yet, here I was, cast aside like an outdated vintage. The rage was there, but so was something else. A clarity, sharp as a blade. I'd given them everything, but I could take it all back. As I re-entered the tent, Dorothy approached, her eyes sharp with understanding. "You okay, Mrs. Harper?" she asked, her voice a quiet anchor. "I will be," I said, my voice steady but laced with fire. "They'll learn soon enough what it costs to forget who built this empire." The music swelled, and I let the moment settle, knowing the real storm was yet to come. The vineyard shadows stretched long and jagged across the Napa Valley soil, mirroring the cracks in my heart. I stood there, phone still warm from my call to Arthur, the weight of my decision to freeze Nathan's $25 million deal settling like dust after a storm. But the rage that had fueled me moments ago gave way to something heavier, something that clawed deeper than Claire's venomous words at the wedding. The help eats in the kitchen was a public wound, but the private betrayals, those were the knives that cut to the bone. I closed my eyes, and the memories flooded in, each one a shard of glass, sharp and unrelenting, slicing through the pride I'd clung to for decades. I saw Nathan at 5, his tiny hands clutching a rope and shell necklace he'd made at summer camp. "Mom, you're my hero," he'd said, his gap-toothed grin brighter than the California sun. I wore that necklace through every boardroom battle, every late-night deal, a talisman of the boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out. I'd built Harper Estates with 200 acres of sweat and sacrifice, sketching vineyard plans while Nathan napped, his soft breaths my only company. That necklace was my anchor, proof that love could outlast loss. But last year, at a gala in San Francisco, Nathan introduced me to a room of investors as Eleanor Harper, our founder. Not Mom. His voice was polished, his smile rehearsed. Claire stood beside him, her eyes glinting like a predator's. "We're modernizing Eleanor's vision," she said, her words dripping with condescension. I laughed it off then, but the sting lingered, a warning I ignored. The deepest cut came 3 months ago, in the quiet of my office. Dorothy had found it in the company's inventory logs. A sale entry, buried like a guilty secret. Nathan and Claire had sold a painting we'd created together when he was 10. A messy canvas of blues and greens, splattered during a rainy afternoon in our old garage. It was our laughter frozen in time, my hand guiding his as we painted vines and dreams. "This is us, Mom," he'd said, smearing paint on my cheek. That canvas hung in my office for 28 years, a relic of the boy who saw me as his world. But they'd sold it for $15,000 to buy a sleek, soulless abstract piece for their new corporate lobby. "It's more aligned with our brand," Claire's email to the board had read. Nathan hadn't even told me. Dorothy handed me the log, her eyes soft with pity. "They didn't ask, Eleanor," she said. "They just took." I stared at the entry, my vision blurring. Not with tears, but with a pain so raw it felt like my heart was unraveling. My son had traded our memory for a check, as if I were a line item to be liquidated. I opened my eyes, the vineyard's air thick with the scent of oak and betrayal. The pain wasn't just that they'd sold the painting, it was what it meant. Nathan, the boy who'd once clung to me through thunderstorms, now saw me as a relic, a name to leverage, not love. Claire's ambition had infected him, turning my legacy into their stepping stone. "They think they can erase you," Dorothy had said over coffee last week, her voice low and fierce. "They're betting you'll stay silent." I hadn't answered her then, but now, standing among the vines, I knew silence was no longer an option. The rage was there, a wildfire in my veins. But it was the heartbreak that anchored me, the realization that the boy I'd raised had chosen Claire's glitter over my blood. I turned back toward the reception tent, the glow of candles mocking the darkness in my chest. The quartet played on, oblivious to the storm I'd unleashed with that phone call. Nathan and Claire were still posing, their laughter a performance for the crowd. But they didn't know yet their world was already crumbling. Dorothy met me at the tent's edge, her face unreadable but her eyes steady. "You did what you had to," she said softly, handing me a glass of water, not wine. I nodded, my voice a whisper of steel. "They'll feel it soon, Dorothy. The ground's already shifting." The music swelled, and I straightened, ready to face the whispers that would soon ripple through the crowd. The Napa Valley night pulsed with the clinking of glasses and the hum of shallow laughter, but beneath the wedding's polished veneer, the ground was already trembling. My phone call to Arthur had severed the $25 million lifeline Nathan thought was his birthright, and the Harper Trust now rested in Dorothy's steady hands. Claire's venomous words, "The help eats in the kitchen," still echoed in my skull, a wound that bled rage and heartbreak in equal measure. But as I stood at the edge of the reception tent, my silk dress catching the breeze, I felt the first ripples of my decision spreading, like cracks spiderwebbing across frozen glass. The guests didn't know yet, but they would. The empire I'd built over 40 years, with 200 acres of vines and a name carved in gold, was no longer Nathan's to parade. And Claire, with her influencer smirk and borrowed power, was about to learn what it cost to cross me. I re-entered the tent, my heels clicking against the wooden floor, each step a declaration. The quartet played a saccharine rendition of some pop ballad, but the air had shifted. Whispers slithered through the crowd, soft at first, then sharper. A woman in a sequined gown leaned toward her husband, her voice low but clear. "Did you hear? Nathan's big expansion deal's off. No announcement tonight." Her husband, a vineyard investor I'd known for decades, raised an eyebrow, glancing at Nathan. My son stood near the bar, his smile strained, his fingers fidgeting with his cufflinks. Claire, draped in a shimmering gown, posed for photos, oblivious to the murmurs. But I saw it the way heads turned, the way glasses paused mid-sip. The society pages would feast on this by morning. Dorothy approached, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. "The board's been notified," she murmured, handing me a folded note. "Arthur's locked the funds. Nathan's team is scrambling." I nodded, my lips a tight line. "Good," I said, my voice low, steel wrapped in silk. "Let them scramble." But the next blow came not from the boardroom but from the vault. 2 days before the wedding, Claire's assistant had emailed Dorothy, claiming I'd approved access to the Harper family heirlooms for Claire's bridal look. They'd taken my grandmother's ruby necklace, a 2-carat gem set in gold, worn by 3 generations of Harper women through wars and weddings. They hadn't asked me. They'd assumed I'd stay silent, just as they'd assumed my money was theirs to spend. Dorothy had flagged it, her voice sharp over the phone. "Eleanor, they used your codes. Claire's wearing your legacy like a costume." I'd told her to let it happen, not out of weakness, but to see how far they'd go. Now I knew. I caught Claire's eye across the tent. She tilted her head, the ruby glinting at her throat, a thief parading her prize. My blood boiled, but I kept my face stone. "Dorothy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "get it back. Now." She didn't hesitate. She crossed the tent, her steps deliberate, and approached Claire near the dance floor. "Mrs. Harper requests her heirlooms returned immediately," Dorothy said, her tone cool as a winter frost. Claire's smile froze, her hand flying to the necklace. "What?" "We're not done with photos," she stammered, her voice pitching high, drawing eyes. Dorothy held out a velvet pouch, unmoved. "Now, Mrs. Dawson." The crowd hushed, the quartet faltering for a beat. Claire's jaw clenched, her eyes darting to Nathan, who stood frozen, his glass half raised. Slowly, she unclasped the necklace, her fingers trembling, and dropped it into the pouch. The ruby caught the light one last time, like a drop of blood against the velvet. Dorothy turned, her nod to me as sharp as a salute. The whispers grew louder now, a tide of gossip swelling. Vivian Caldwell, my old friend and a San Francisco gallery owner, leaned toward a wine critic nearby. "Eleanor's pulling the reins," she said, her voice carrying just enough. "That's what happens when you forget who owns the vineyard." Nathan's face paled, his laughter dying as he caught the shift in the room. Claire's smile was a brittle thing, cracking under the weight of eyes. They didn't know the full scope of what I'd done not yet, but they felt it, like a storm rolling in over the valley. I sipped my water, the taste clean and sharp, and let the moment settle. The real reckoning was coming, and it would be public, undeniable, a declaration carved in the roots of the empire I'd built. Dorothy returned, the pouch in her hand, and whispered, "It's done, Eleanor. But they're not finished underestimating you." I met her gaze, my heart still raw but my resolve iron. "They will be," I said, my voice a promise, as the candles flickered and the night prepared to unravel further. The Napa Valley night buzzed with the clatter of silverware and the false warmth of candlelight, but the air inside the wedding tent was electric with tension. My call to Arthur had frozen Nathan's $25 million vineyard expansion, and the whispers had already begun to spread, like wildfire through dry vines. Claire's smug theft of my grandmother's ruby necklace had been undone, the gem now safe in Dorothy's velvet pouch, but the wound of her words, the help eats in the kitchen, still bled raw in my chest. Nathan's silence, his laughter with Claire while I stood humiliated, was a betrayal deeper than any cut. The pain was a living thing, clawing at my heart, but it had forged something harder, sharper, a resolve that burned brighter than the chandeliers above. I was Eleanor Harper, the woman who'd built Harper Estates from a $5,000 loan and 200 acres of stubborn dreams. They thought they could erase me. They were wrong. I stood at the edge of the tent, my silk dress catching the breeze, my eyes scanning the crowd. The guests sipped Claire's insipid rosé, their murmurs growing louder as news of the canceled deal trickled through. Nathan stood near the bar, his smile faltering, his fingers twitching like a man sensing a storm. Claire, radiant in her gown, posed for photos, but her eyes darted, catching the shift in the room. Dorothy handed me a glass of water, her voice low. "The board's buzzing, Eleanor. They know you pulled the plug." I nodded, my lips tight. "Let them buzz," I said. "It's time they heard the truth." Vivian Caldwell, my old friend and San Francisco gallery owner, caught my gaze from across the tent. Her nod was subtle, but it carried the weight of decades. "Do it," she mouthed, her eyes glinting with approval. I straightened, my heart pounding but my voice steady, and stepped toward the microphone as the DJ paused the quartet. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear, slicing through the chatter like a blade through silk. The crowd hushed, glasses frozen midair. Nathan's head snapped up, his face pale. Claire's smile twitched, her hand clutching her champagne flute. "I won't keep you long," I said, my tone warm but edged with steel. "I want to thank you for celebrating this new chapter in our family. But I have an announcement of my own." A murmur rippled through the tent, eyes wide, waiting. I let the moment hang, savoring the weight of their attention. After 4 decades building Harper Estates, I am stepping away completely. I've redirected the $25 million expansion fund to a new initiative, supporting women's education and housing across California. Gasps punctuated the silence, sharp as shattering glass. Nathan's glass slipped, splashing Merlot on his cuff. Claire's face froze, her eyes darting to him, then back to me. "Legacy," I continued, my voice rising, "isn't a vineyard or a last name. It's who honors your name when you're not in the room. It's the hands that built this empire mine, not the ones that thought they could claim it." The crowd was still, the air thick with shock. Vivian clapped first, her hands sharp and deliberate, followed by a hesitant swell from others. I locked eyes with Nathan, his face a mask of disbelief, his ambition crumbling under the weight of my words. Claire stood rigid, her flute trembling, a chandelier without light. "Thank you," I said, stepping back, my voice steady but my heart roaring with triumph. I'd cut every tie, financial, legal, emotional, and they felt it. The tent erupted in whispers, phones already buzzing with texts to the society pages. Dorothy met me at the tent's edge, her eyes fierce with pride. "That was an earthquake, Eleanor," she said, handing me my clutch. "They didn't see it coming." I smiled, a small, sharp thing. "They never do," I replied. But as I glanced back at Nathan, his shoulders slumped. And Claire, her face tight with panic, I felt a flicker of something darker. The pain of their betrayal, the necklace, the painting. Nathan's silence still burned, but there was something else, a shadow lurking beneath their polished facade. I'd shaken their world, but I sensed they were plotting something worse, something colder. The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the vines, and I knew the next storm was already brewing. The Napa Valley night had turned brittle, the candlelight in the wedding tent flickering like a pulse about to stop. My public declaration severing ties with Harper Estates and redirecting $25 million to women's causes had shaken the room, leaving Nathan pale and Claire's smile a cracked mask. The whispers of the crowd, the return of my grandmother's ruby necklace, and the frozen expansion deal were just the beginning. My heart still burned with the raw pain of Nathan's betrayal. The sold painting, the erased title of Mom, Claire's venomous, "The help eats in the kitchen." But as I stood at the tent's edge, my silk dress catching the cool breeze, I sensed a darker shadow lurking beneath their polished facades. The rage that had fueled my announcement was now a quiet flame, tempered by a clarity that cut deeper than any knife. I was Eleanor Harper, the woman who'd built a 200-acre empire from a $5,000 loan, and I wasn't done yet. I slipped away from the reception, my heels silent on the vineyard's gravel path, drawn to the old wine cellar where I used to escape during late-night harvests. The air was thick with the scent of oak and fermenting grapes, a sanctuary of my own making. But as I approached the cellar door, Voices sharp and familiar stopped me cold. They came from inside, muffled but unmistakable. Nathan's low murmur, laced with frustration. Claire's voice, venomous as ever. I pressed myself against the weathered wood, my breath shallow, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. "You said she'd be predictable," Claire hissed, her words slicing through the night. "You said Eleanor would play the gracious matriarch, sign off on everything, and fade away." Nathan's reply was colder than I'd ever heard. "She's 68, Claire. One confused moment on record, a missed meeting, a shaky signature, and we can declare her unfit. The trust, the estate, it'll all be ours." My stomach dropped, the world tilting under my feet. "She trusts me," Nathan added, his voice a twisted echo of the boy who'd called me his hero. "We just need her to slip." The pain hit like a tidal wave, drowning the rage that had carried me this far. My son, the boy I'd raised through heartbreak and hustle, was plotting to strip me of everything, not just my legacy, but my sanity. Claire's laugh was sharp, like glass shattering. "If she won't hand it over, we'll take it. A doctor's note, a lawyer's nudge, and she's out of the picture." I stood frozen, my hand pressed against the cellar door, the wood rough under my fingers. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated excavation of my existence. They wanted me declared incompetent, a frail old woman to be shuffled aside. The heartbreak was a physical ache, my chest tight with the weight of a love I'd poured into Nathan, now twisted into a weapon against me. But I wasn't frail. I wasn't done. I pulled my phone from my clutch, my hands steady despite the storm inside. The recorder app glowed in the dark, and I hit record, capturing every damning word. "We move fast," Claire was saying, her voice low, conspiratorial, "before she rewrites the trust again." Too late, I thought, my lips curling into a grim smile. I'd already shifted the Harper Trust to Dorothy's oversight, and my announcement had cut their financial lifeline. I saved the recording, my fingers deliberate, and texted it to Arthur Bennett with a single line. "Evidence. Seal it." His reply was instant. "Received. Safe." Dorothy's warning from weeks ago echoed in my mind. "They're betting you'll stay silent, Eleanor." Not this time. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, my resolve hardening like the oak barrels inside the cellar. They thought they could bury me. They'd forgotten I was the roots. I returned to the tent, the quartet's music now a hollow backdrop to the storm in my soul. Nathan and Claire were back among the guests, their smiles rehearsed, but I saw the cracks, Nathan's tense jaw, Claire's darting eyes. Dorothy met me near the bar, her gaze sharp. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice low. "Worse," I replied, my tone steel. "I've heard one." I handed her the clutch, the phone inside a ticking bomb. "Keep this safe," I said. "They're not just after my money. They're after my mind." Her eyes widened, but she nodded, her loyalty a steady anchor. The candles burned low, the night stretching thin, and I knew the final reckoning was coming, not in anger, but in peace. The kind that comes when you reclaim what's yours. The Napa Valley wedding tent faded behind me, its candlelight swallowed by the night as I walked away, the gravel crunching under my heels like the last echoes of a life I was leaving behind. Claire's cruel words, the help eats in the kitchen, and Nathan's chilling conspiracy to declare me unfit still burned, raw and jagged, in my chest. The painting sold, the necklace stolen, the trust betrayed, each wound had carved deeper than the last. But as I stood among the vines, their leaves whispering in the moonlight, I felt something new, a quiet, unshakable peace. I'd severed the $25 million lifeline Nathan thought was his, redirected it to women's causes, and recorded his plot with Claire to bury me. I was Eleanor Harper, the woman who'd built Harper Estates from a $5,000 loan and 200 acres of stubborn dreams, and I was done letting them rewrite my story. I left Napa the next morning, the dawn breaking over the valley like a promise I was ready to keep. My new home awaited at Lake Tahoe, a cedar-shingled cottage nestled against the water's edge, where the air smelled of pine and freedom. The lake stretched before me, its surface glassy and still, reflecting a woman who'd finally reclaimed herself. I unpacked only what mattered. My old sketchbooks, filled with vineyard plans, a photo of Nathan at 6, paint on his cheeks, and the ruby necklace, its 2-carat gem glinting like a reclaimed crown. The pain of Nathan's betrayal lingered. A mother's love doesn't die, even when it's betrayed, but it no longer owned me. I'd spent 40 years building an empire for him, only to watch him trade it for Claire's ambition. Now, I was building something new, something mine. Dorothy arrived that afternoon, her suitcase as practical as her loyalty. "You look lighter," she said, setting a mug of chamomile tea on the porch table. I smiled, the first real one in months. "I am," I said, my voice soft but sure. "They thought they could erase me, Dorothy. They forgot I'm the roots." She nodded, her eyes warm with pride. "The board's still reeling from your announcement," she said. "Nathan's been calling Arthur non-stop. Claire's posting cryptic quotes on Instagram, but the sponsors are pulling back." I sipped my tea, the warmth steadying me. "Let them post," I said. "Their world's crumbling, not mine." The Harper Initiative, my new foundation, was already taking shape. $25 million for scholarships, housing grants, and training programs for women across California. My legacy wasn't vines or wealth, it was the lives I'd lift, the stories I'd protect. Vivian Caldwell called later, her voice crackling over the line from San Francisco. "Eleanor, you've set the valley on fire," she said, her laugh sharp and approving. "The society pages are calling you the matriarch who rewrote the rules. Nathan and Claire are scrambling, but no one's buying their spin." I leaned back in my chair, the lake's ripples catching the sunset. "Good," I said. "Let them learn what it costs to underestimate a woman who built her own empire." Vivian paused, then added, "You've done more than protect your name, Eleanor. You've given us all permission to stand tall." Her words settled over me, a balm for the scars Nathan and Claire had left. I wasn't just reclaiming my legacy, I was redefining it, not for my son, but for every woman who'd been told her time was up. The Tahoe air was cool, the stars sharp above the water. I thought of the boy who'd called me his hero, his rope and shell necklace now tucked in a drawer, a memory I'd cherish but no longer carry. The pain of his betrayal, the painting, the conspiracy. His silence still ached, but it was a dull throb now, not a scream. I'd faced their plot, recorded their words, and protected my truth. Arthur had the evidence, locked away like a vaulted vintage, ready if I needed it. But I didn't need to fight anymore. I'd won by walking away, by choosing peace over vengeance. The lake's stillness mirrored my own, a quiet strength I'd earned through fire. As I stood on the porch, Dorothy joined me, her clipboard set aside for once. "What's next, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice soft against the night. "Truth," I said, my gaze on the water, telling it, living it, teaching it. The stars gleamed, and I felt the weight of my new path, a legacy not of wealth, but of courage. The world would hear it, not from Nathan's polished speeches or Claire's curated posts, but from me, unapologetic and whole. The Lake Tahoe dawn broke over the water, its light soft and steady, like a promise kept after a long night. I stood on my cottage porch, the cedar planks cool under my feet, the air sharp with pine and possibility. The pain of Nathan's betrayal, his silence as Claire sneered. The help eats in the kitchen, the sold painting, the chilling plot to deem me unfit still lingered, a faint ache in my chest. But it no longer defined me. I'd built Harper Estates from a $5,000 loan and 200 acres of Napa Valley dreams, only to watch my son and his wife try to erase me. I'd fought back, freezing their $25 million deal, reclaiming my grandmother's ruby necklace, and redirecting my wealth to women's causes. Now, at 68, I'd found peace not in vengeance but in truth. The lake's ripples carried my reflection, not as a mother betrayed, but as Eleanor Harper, whole and unyielding. This is my lesson to you. especially those who felt their worth questioned with age. Your legacy isn't what others take from you, it's what you choose to give. Never let your name be diminished. Not by family, not by time. Stand firm, guard your truth, and build anew, even when it hurts. If my story resonates, share it below. Tell me how you've reclaimed your voice. Like this video if it stirred something in you, and subscribe to the Unwanted Revenge for more stories of quiet strength. Your truth matters. Let's keep it alive together.